Hey, we're back, and we are doing new biographies now. And I'm going to be a little quicker on these than the old biographies, just to kind of give you a little taste of some things. And not all these folks are new people, of course. These are people from generations ago. But I'm going to try to be quick on these. First is an autobiography. Again, kind of I started with St. Augustine's autobiography with the old biographies, and now I'm going to start with the new biographies. An autobiography as well, and it is none other than Jürgen Moltmann's A Broad Place, which he takes from, that phrase he takes from the Psalms. He brought me into a broad place, and Moltmann's a fascinating thinker, a fascinating person. He starts with his kind of upper middle class kind of childhood in Germany, and he talks through kind of how he came to a place of studies and just loved learning, was just a voluminous reader and studier and very academically gifted. He's a genius, clearly. And then, of course, was involved in World War II as a young person. Actually was captured, became a POW, was captured by the British and ended up in a British POW camp for Germans. And there he met Jesus Christ in the Gospel of Mark, in the Passion narrative at the end of the Gospel of Mark. And he came to this conclusion that only the suffering Jesus can help. And it's just interesting. Again, he's a very unique thinker. I wouldn't agree with a lot of things that he believes in. But I'm so enraptured sometimes by some things he says about the God of grace and who God is in Jesus Christ for us, that you just can't avoid reading him and being perplexingly challenged by him. And his writings that he did over about 3 decades, from the 70s to the 90s, ended up as 6 systematic theology studies, and really they are just, he calls them conversations. It shows how interesting of a character he is. He doesn't see them as dogmatic statements. He sees them more as conversations with people. Again, fascinating person. If you're into Jürgen Moltmann, you've read something by him, maybe Theology of Hope, Trinity in the Kingdom, The Coming God, some of his famous books, The Crucified God, some interesting books that he writes. You might find his autobiography enlightening and encouraging, as I have. P&R has done a series the last few years where they have taken American Reformed thinkers and people and done some really good biographies on them that are both, I think, just healthy and critical. They're good biographies, but they're not propagandist. They're diving into the humanness of this person, and they're giving some critical evaluation of them, along with lauding the things that are praiseworthy. And there are 2. There's 5 in the series. I wish they'd do more, but 2 of them I've found really, really helpful. The first one is Cornelius Fantilles by John Muthers' pen. And Cornelius Fantilles is a famous Northern Presbyterian, and he's really a luminary of Westminster Seminary in Philadelphia, and continues to inspire many, many, many people into his apologetics and his systematic thinking and his kind of his nexus of thought. And he's a fascinating character. He's famous for sparring with none other than Karl Barth, and their children theologically continue to fight one another. The children of Van Til, the children of Barth, continue to fight one another, hopefully not to the death. But yeah, he's got a good biography on here, and these are introductory level, easy to read. The next one's by Shawn Michael Lucas, and it's pretty good. It's a lot of people, Robert Louis Dabney is who it is. He's got some problems. I mean, he's Southern Presbyterian. He comes with the baggage of slavery and being a proponent, of course, being from that area. There's just indefensible stuff in his life. But Shawn Michael Lucas does a good job of calling it out. He calls it out. He's critical of it. And I think, but why I enjoy this biography is because he doesn't pretend it's not there, and he doesn't just move on, and he doesn't just stay there. Because there's many things about Robert Louis Dabney that are commendable. He might have been one of the greatest thinkers in Christianity in that century, in the 19th century. As a Christian, and so there's so much to be lauded for him. Though it's important to criticize him where he needs to be criticized, that is indefensible in his life. So there's much to learn from biographies, as there would be from our own biographies, of things that you want to imitate, and there's things you want to not imitate. There's things you want to avoid. So you learn from both the good and the bad. So even though there is that, I would definitely recommend still a good biography on him. And Shawn Michael Lucas does a good job on writing about Dabney there. 2 biographies just came out on this guy. and his stretch in the Christian and the literary world is global. It's none other than C.S. Lewis. And two guys just wrote some really good stuff on him as a biography. The first is Alan Jacobs, called The Narnian. And he goes a little bit further into, I think, the imagination of C.S. Lewis and his world of Narnia. So it's a biography, but it's also kind of the legacy in a little bit of a way with his writings. And it's really good. I think it's also a little bit more tailored probably towards just a casual, maybe non-Christian reader. But very good book, easy to digest. And then the next one is by Alistair McGrath, called C.S. Lewis: A Life, Eccentric Genius, Reluctant Prophet. Reminds you a little bit of probably Jonah or something like that in the Bible. And his is a little bit more, I would probably say it's a little bit more into the humanness of who he was, what he was, his life, his legacy, without maybe as much the thematicness of Narnia as involved, I think. Though it's still in there, but I don't think it dives quite as much into that as Jacob's volume does. But I think I got that book for $12 or something like that. It's really, really good. Let's do three more. There are three currently well-known, four well-known biographies of Dietrich Bonhoeffer that are swirling out there. The first is kind of on the far right by Eric Metaxas, and Metaxas is kind of an evangelical pundit. And again, I don't want to pan it, but I wouldn't recommend it as the one really to read of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, given that I think they're trying to apprehend Bonhoeffer for an evangelical purpose. What I don't think Bonhoeffer is I don't think he believes in the evangelical gospel. He's not an American evangelical. And so we need to not pretend that he is that. And I think Metaxas makes us think that he's an American evangelical, and he's absolutely not. So we want to kind of avoid the propagandist tendency there, I think. On the other side is, I think, a little bit more of on the theologically liberal side is the volume by Charles Marsh and called Strange Glory. And I think it's actually really good. It's a very critical biography, but it's coming from a more of a liberal theological perspective, and it kind of highlights the liberalism a little bit more of Bonhoeffer. And again, I think it's good, but I don't think it's kind of in the middle there of kind of how we should appraise him in a holistic way. The other two biographies that are, I think, excellent and are more commendable in my thought, of course, first is Eberhard Betka's Bonhoeffer book, his 1,000-pager. And it's hard not to recommend that because it's been kind of the standard for a long time. But just a few years back, Ferdinand Schliegen, it's such a long name, it's hard to pronounce. he came out with his own version, and it's like a paragraph. His name's like a paragraph. So Ferdinand Schliegen came out with his own biography, and I think a lot of scholars of Bonhoeffer and very interested people in his life would say this is probably the best one overall. It's also an updated one of Betka's as well. And so if you're interested in Dietrich Bonhoeffer, I think I got this for $25. It really gets into everything about Bonhoeffer without, I think, maybe some of the baggage maybe of trying to kind of play towards a certain perspective a little bit. But it's absolutely amazing, and it's got great pictures in there too, and it's just a lively biography of Bonhoeffer. All right, the last two, we could probably call both of these heroes of the faith in their different respects and areas. The first it's more of a challenging, I would say this is a little bit more of a challenging read because it's a critical biography. Typically when it's a critical biography, what it's saying is that it's going to leave no stone unturned, and it's going to be a little bit more of a scholarly assessment of someone's life. So the humanness and the legacy is just all right there, but it's also situating the person in history and giving a really full-orbed picture of who this person was. And so, like I said with Luther in the old biography section, I love that book, not because it's necessarily the most gets you fired up, but because it really gives you a picture of who Luther was in his context as a Augustinian monk at the turn of the 15th and 16th centuries, coming out of the medieval period into the humanist and Renaissance period. And it's fascinating, it's kind of pre-modern in Luther's context. this book is promising to do the same thing with none other than Herman Bavinck. And Herman Bavinck's a critical biography, and this one's by Jim Eglinton, and he's a great writer and really gifted in the area of Bavinck scholarship. He's come out with a monograph on Bavinck's thought as well, and he's written for a lot of folks in the evangelical world and the Reform world. So I just got this book this week. I haven't read it. It just looks fascinatingly good. I'd encourage you all, if you're interested in Bavinck, he's having a renaissance. His 4-volume, right? Oh my gosh, there it is. His 4-volume Reformed Dogmatics. He had his first volume of 2 volumes, I think, on Reformed ethics. He has a new book that just came out recently called Christian Worldview. I just bought his book on the Christian family recently, and though it's been out for about 10 years. He's having a complete and total renaissance of his thinking, as he should. He's really, in some respects, the greatest Dutch Reformed thinker that the world's known. And so he's having kind of a full-on renaissance. And so he's got 2 biographies that have come out. One I've got by Ron Gleason. It's actually pretty good. But this one's probably going to end up being the standard, I think, after all is said and done. All right, last one. This guy's a personal hero of mine. I think that he's a kind of person that you want to follow and about everything he was about. And he's been a hero to the evangelical and conservative faith of many people for a very, very long time. And his writings have touched the hearts and the consciousness and the societal desires of loving neighbor like few have. You can have a whole bookshelf full of his books. He's written so much. And he just died. He just died about a year ago, and we lost a hero. But as he says, we have living faith in the living God. And he said one time famously, and if that living faith could fail, it already would have. But it doesn't, because it's in the living God who lives for us in Jesus Christ. And he's none other than Jim Packer. Jim Packer is really in a lot of ways, the last Puritan. And he was steeped in the Puritans. His life was about, many of the famous Puritans, especially Richard Baxter and Jeremiah Burroughs and Richard Sibbes and others, John Owen. But his writings were just so pastorally sensitive, but he always was looking to make a connection. He was always looking to unify people. He was not the kind of Puritan in a lot of ways that was divisive and harmful and hurtful, though he divided when he needed to. He very much needed to. So I want to commend this. It's by Leland Reichen, obviously well-known provost of Wheaton College, and it's just called J.I. Packer Life, not about an evangelical life. And I just would commend it to you. Just incredible stuff. When you read someone's life, you're just like kind of reading someone's mail a little bit, but it's just powerful to see how God's used people. And so not everyone is worth reading about. Not everyone's life is worth reading about. But I think J.I. Packer is one of those that it's just, he's a hero. He's a modern hero. And when you have a biography put out for you like a couple months after you die, you've made an impact across the world. So I would encourage you to read a handful of those. I've got many others, but only got so much time. So I hope that'll be an encouragement to you.